Oh,
All right, we live. We live. Seed talk. Stuff to make your seeds walk. Ironically, we're gonna be talking about stuff that make sure your seeds don't walk no more. Death penalty. Yeah. Inject humor on uncomfortable situations, but we're gonna be talking about the deaths, just the death penalty, man. Like, what do you think about, what I'm saying, the death penalty and whatnot? You think it's something we should have? You know what I'm saying? Is it something that you have mixed feelings about? I mean, do you think this legal system has enough fortitude and integrity to actually carry out something that's so final? Knowing how unjust, what I'm saying, our legal system is, towards, marginalized people and how many mistakes they make, how many times they send people to prison and, death row who don't, who haven't earned it, you know? Um, do you think that the system is strong enough now with like DNA evidence and forensic evidence to carry out that? I don't know. I think that a lot of people, I think Bobby, you were kind of saying a version of this also, like people want to talk about it, but then you put them in a situation, what you gonna do, you know? So I'm gonna tag some people and whatnot, get some people in the room and whatnot, so we could talk about this. But I want people in the comments to chime in on what y'all think about, what I'm saying, the death penalty. You know,
Patricia looks frozen. Oh, there you go.
she's cool. She back.
I'm back.
So I mean, let's just start it off. I mean, like anyone can chime in. Like, what are your first initial thoughts when you talk about the death penalty?
I guess I'll go first since I'm the one who kind of said I think this should be a good topic to talk about. I'm not gonna lie. For many years, I've always have been for the death penalty for the most part. I really, I'm not gonna sit here and deny it. I really have, but I have seen over the years, I kind of had to sit and think about it for a minute because it's like when do we determine what is eligible or justified for a death penalty? Me personally, I've always looked at terms of the situation and the degree of it. But even in that stance, someone could still be like, I just don't think it's right to take another life despite what they've done. But as I was saying behind the stage, I feel when it comes to death penalty, you need to be certain and positive, and the evidence is strong for you to even make that an option to do. Because I was bringing up the case back in it was 2011. I was 2009. I don't know why I said 2000. Maybe because I was working at the job at the time. But in September of 2011, they had executed Troy Davis, which is a black man in Georgia, for I believe murdering a police officer in 88, 89. So he's been on death row all those years. And when the time came up for his execution, and they went to, I guess, review with the jurors who were part of that trial initially, a few of them actually start having second thoughts about it. I believe when it gets to that point, I think the death penalty should be off the table because obviously there is obviously these people change where they change their minds or maybe they finally really looked at the situation and start to re-examine it from a different pair of lenses since time has passed. So I feel stuff like that. I think people, when it comes to that, with this uncertainty, I don't think death penalty should be on the table. And with the situation right now going on in South Carolina, where apparently I was saying behind the stage, for whatever reason, lethal injection is no longer available. I'm not sure if because of the pandemic is
Expensive.
going, huh?
Expensive.
It's expensive. Oh, it's expensive. That now they pulling out the old school way of execution, which is the electric chair or the firing squad. Me personally, I didn't know those two was still. I didn't know those two still exist. To be honest with you, I didn't know. But apparently, I'm here in Utah to still kind of do it. That's not my words. That's just what I've been reading in the comments. So it blew my mind that we still have those sort of options.
Yeah.
And the man apparently chose the firing squad. And I'm not gonna lie, that sounds it does sound a bit inhumane in a bit because for people who they're going to select to execute him or to be the firing squad, it's like how you find. how you found the nerve to gun somebody down who I'm pretty sure is probably going to, I'm pretty sure in those cases they normally bound it in some shape or whatever.
Well, they
I'm not
say
sure how that works.
when I know about it, only no one knows who has the live rounds. That's what I was told. I know that was how it was back in the day. But
Mm.
yeah, no one knows who has the actual live round and shot the actual person. So
Okay, yeah, I don't know how that works. So it's just like it's one thing to want to kill somebody out of self-defense, or even want to kill somebody out of revenge for someone who had did something that deeply affected you. So I'm not saying they're right. I'm just saying those are normal feelings that people would have. But just to go and just take somebody's life that you don't know, I don't know. That's just it's a strange position to be in. I don't think I will be honest, I don't think I could have done it. Even if he did something very evil, I still don't think I would have had the guts to do it. I don't think I had the guts. But that's how I look at the death penalty. I am for it, but I don't think every situation is called for it. But y'all could chime in and add some input. And I'll probably have some more.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll be interested to hear what Bobby has to say from the legal perspective, and of course what Doc has to say.
Yeah.
Just from a scholarship, and I can chime in. I want to know if it's effective, man. That's what I really want to know. I wonder if the death penalty actually prevents certain crimes, or are we just it's just the thing of like you kill somebody, now you got to die, you know.
I don't know that there's been too much evidence to suggest that it stops anybody from doing anything. I think just the mere perpetuation of violent crime in America over the last 30 years, just my short lifetime, shows that it hasn't been effective as a measure of caution, because that's kind of how we discuss it. Oh, well, the type of person who is willing to take a third person's life, are they also the type of person to go, oh, wait, I might get the chair? I don't know that that's how that goes. I don't know that that logic stands up. So I don't think that it's been effective in that way. I also think that, just kind of responding to what Precious was saying, it would be great to do a character study on the people who volunteer to pull the trigger or flip the switch. What kinds of people are they? What type of mental and psychological profile does that person have? Because that's a person that the state is employing in a law enforcement capacity, right? So it's one thing to say you're willing to kill somebody in order to save a third person, but are you willing to kill somebody simply to punish because of what they did to a third person? Completely different question. So like in principle, like Precious is saying, there has to be a set of facts that each one of us potentially could be enraged by enough to do that. But I could only imagine it from the standpoint of if it had just happened. What's weird to me is that the person who's pulling the trigger or flipping the switch is having to do that years after the event, like so far down the line. How do you even generate the frustration? How do you get, worked up to do it? Because I couldn't do it from a neutral state. I would have to be emotionally compromised in order to pull it off. And then the final thing that I would just say from a standpoint of the academic or legal perspective is that the highest value the death penalty serves, to me, at least in my head, and I'm not saying that I would ever like move for that or something, but the highest value that it could serve is that it does allow you to put a cap, a limit, and mix and match with certain fact patterns. So for example, you can get to a point where someone can get a life sentence for like a third armed robbery, for example, or in New Mexico, as ridiculous as this sounds, your third trafficking offense could result in like 22 years of imprisonment. And
Jeez.
so what bothers me is that, and that's a measure because the cartel operates down here and they want to try and disincentivize that, which also doesn't work. But if you think about it, it's weird to me that someone could get more time for trafficking on a third occasion than you could for intentionally killing somebody on one occasion. And so where you have a more violent penalty, something above just time, you can at least have a rational explanation for why someone is getting the penalty they're getting. Because once it all gets consolidated at the end, it starts to look really crazy. And it does make you ask, why is this person doing the same time as this person? And folks ask that question anyway. But if the death penalty is off the table and you can kill somebody and get the same sentence as someone who trafficked coke 3 times, or somebody who is on their 15th DWI, then that does start to look absurd, and people think it's absurd already. So I would just leave it at that.
Well, what you thinking, Trisha?
I have probably a different perspective, having lived in a country that technically did not have the death penalty, doodstraf in the Netherlands, although they did repeal it for a certain time right after World War II for anyone that was complicit in sending Jews to die. They beheaded them, but otherwise they find it cruel and unusual punishment. They won't even extradite you if there's the risk that you will be prosecuted in your country and there's a death penalty. On the other hand, I'm from here, and I realize that in theory, I could agree with the death penalty, but the problem is that there's so much that needs to be addressed in terms of equity and who receives the death penalty. That's the reason that I'm against it. And then also technically then as a vegan too, I should be against killing other humans which is interesting because I've had conversations with vegans that are very pro death penalty.
They're not going to eat.
And then I'm like, but that's the person that you're killing. And they don't see,
right,
as well as pointing out the systemic inequity and racism within who ultimately receives the death penalty. But also, we also have to realize that, death penalty is not the only option just for killing someone. Like there are 6 states in the US, and I saw someone mention in the comments about, for raping a child or killing a child. There are 6 states in the US in which you cannot have carnal knowledge as a child, or else one of the things they can do is the death penalty. They all happen to be in the South, one of which is Louisiana, which enacted this law in 1995. There have only been 2 people executed in the whole country because of this. And you can guess what race those 2 people were. You can't tell me they're the only 2 people that have ever been convicted, even in those 6 states that have this law for carnal knowledge of a child. And I think in Louisiana, it's 13 years old and under. So if you're having carnal knowledge of a child under 13 years old, you could be sentenced to death. I think in Georgia, it's 10. So there are other offenses. And of course, treason is another one that you could be executed for as well. So I think the problem is that the laws are not applied equitably. And until they're applied equitably, I can't say that I'm for it in any instance.
Yeah, and especially when you got places in predominantly Black inner cities where the circumstances often lead to violent crime, and they're not changing the circumstances. They're not changing the situations and the conditions those people are in to make it, less likely for them to use violence to resolve their issues or to feel like they have to survive. You're not changing those conditions. And then it's a death penalty for murder. It's just like a revolving door. It's like a setup. It's like you're not preventing violent crime from happening, especially something like murder. Like you take like a South Central LA when in the height of gang, violence, like they weren't changing the conditions. But people continue to kill each other, and then like you're getting sent, given the death penalty, but nothing is changing to prevent violent crime. You're not changing the conditions and the circumstances. And inevitably that's what happened to Tookie Williams. I mean, that's why, he got executed is because, he was, doing a gang life, you know what I'm saying, and killing people. But that was based on a set of circumstances and conditions that really perpetuated that kind of, violent activity, I would argue. And it just doesn't seem fair not to, allocate money to changing the conditions to, lower the percentages of people hurting themselves, but then having a death penalty. It's just kind of like it's just another continuation of what Trisha was already talking about, how there's inequity. Certain neighborhoods are going to have more people who are pumping out people that are going to be eligible and perfect criteria for the death penalty than other neighborhoods. I mean, that's just going to be a fact. I mean, like Beverly Hills is not pumping out as many death penalty, recipients as, like, maybe a Watts or a South Central. I don't see it. So it's just like, from a personal level, then it becomes on a personal level, what would you do if someone hurts your child, or a loved one? And that's why I was always saying about the Tukey Williams things. He was touted as kind of like a hero for writing a children's book, but this is after he didn't kill someone's loved ones. And I always thought that was just really weird, and it's just like, what about those people's, loved one who was lost at the hands of, crime? I don't know if I'm pretty sure he killed civilians too. It wasn't like he was just killing people who are mutual combatants. I'm pretty sure he killed some civilians, but I'm not sure. We might want to research that. But on a personal and emotional take, I have mixed feelings, because I'm all for, someone dying if they do something to my loved one, but I ain't trying to do it. You know what I mean? I don't like hurting people. I don't like seeing people get hurt. You know what I'm saying?
I think that's a little bit of cap, because we've heard stories about you willing to punch somebody in the face.
Yeah, I didn't like it though.
Huh?
I didn't like it.
But I'm saying you could get there.
Yeah, I definitely could. But I'm speaking from a point that I'm not there. My emotions aren't there. So if I'm being salient and if I'm being honest, I don't like it. I don't even like the idea of me having to put myself in a situation where I could hurt someone and they could hurt me and it could lead to death. I don't even like that. I don't even like that scenario. That doesn't sound good to me.
It's going to be all bad, right? Everything has to be absolutely terrible.
Good. Yeah. I mean, that's one way to look at it.
Like, you would never reach that point in any situation where something was not the absolute worst scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely reach that, but I mean, a good scenario for me is that I stay alive. That's a good scenario for me, and I don't go to the hospital, you know what I'm saying? And I don't go to prison, that would be a good, and it's just like the best way to prevent, certain stuff like that. I know it sounds real like cliche, but we got to figure out how to make better choices so it won't actually have to lead to a life or death situation. And if it did, I probably wouldn't. I don't know if I would even feel better. I don't know. I don't know if I would feel better if someone had, killed or really, hurt my loved one, and they became perfect, criteria and received the death penalty. I don't know if I would feel good about it. I don't know if I feel better about it. I don't know. I feel better if they just were dead to me, but out of sight, out of mind type thing. But I just think, like, the whole trial and everything and going through that whole process of appealing it could take years. Like, it might make it worse because you just want to be done and have it resolved and be over with. And I don't know if someone dying is resolution.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm going to be jaded because when you talk to victims for a living, you take on their beliefs in a way. You take on their experiences. I've had mothers, for example, ask me if, I'm not going to say they request the death penalty, but they talk about it that way just with somebody who's abused their daughter too many times. And it's, I would do anything to see that person not exist. I would do anything for this person to no longer hurt my child. And a lot of times when you're hearing it, you're like, I mean, okay, they bruised their face, but is that really, is that proportional? Like, do you want disproportional violence, or do you just want proportional violence? Because we don't have that. There's no vigilante justice. You can't go over there and punch them in the face the same way that your daughter got punched. But they fear what's going to happen next. And then you have to ask yourself a question like, would you be upset with that parent for saying, if that person could be eliminated now before they take it to the next level, right? Then my child will be safe. And that's how simple it is for people in the moment, that it's not about an academic discussion or equity or justice or fairness for those people right then. They just want their person to be safe. That's no way for us to make law, though. On the contrary, the lack of fairness that Trisha has talked about is absolutely at the height of concerns, because if we can't even verify that the thing we're asserting happened and the person we're asserting did it, then the question of how we should punish them, especially with regards to death penalty, should never be on the table. I mean, for me, the starting point with the death penalty is we absolutely have 100% confidence in our conviction. So that's reserved, for me at least, in cases where you have an admission, in cases where you see somebody, you have visual evidence of somebody doing something. Other than that, I just can't imagine entertaining it as a prosecutor. I would leave you with this anecdote. When I was in college, we had the district attorney from Marion County in Oregon, and they had the death penalty at the time. And that was probably back in 2013, or actually it was 2011. They had the death penalty at the time. And he was telling me, he was talking to our class, and he says, I believe in the death penalty. And we're at a progressive school in Oregon, and everybody's shocked and morally outraged. And he says, what do you do with somebody who does the following? And it was a guy who he thought that he made a bomb that did not work. So he made a bomb and put it in a shopping center. And he made this with the idea that it was going to scare people. He thought it would be interesting to scare people with a bomb. And the bomb went off. And it went off because a toddler approached it and did something to make it go off. This toddler is obviously in pieces. So the district attorney there looked at that and he said, this doesn't belong. He decided on a personal level, he didn't actually think that person deserved. And I think that's where we get in the challenging part, is that when we have this sort of subjective piece where someone can decide whether someone deserves to live at an individual level, I think that's where it's really challenging. In my perfect world, a jury, you would need 12 jurors to make that decision. And you would just deal with whether or not you could convict the person of murder. And if 12 peers, when I say peers, I mean literal peers, they come to the conclusion that that's something that they think is necessary, I guess at that point, then I start to be like, okay. But to your point, fairness, when I say peers, is literal. So like if we were to go into Watts, California, I would want to see 12 people like the defendant. But we also know that's never going to happen. And that's what's so problematic about this for me from a fairness standpoint.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My small brain is still trying to figure out, how do you create a bomb that doesn't work, but then it works?
I don't know. That's another good. Do you believe him at all? Do you believe him?
Absolutely not. I don't believe him. It's hogwash.
Does that make it better or worse?
I'm still like, bro, how does that even admissible? That's a terrible argument. I made a bomb that doesn't work, but it worked. That's terrible.
That happens.
Well, the question I would have is, why are you trying to make a bomb in the first place?
Just to scare people.
So then someone's going to come on here and say that guy's obviously mentally ill.
Or someone could have died just from the explosion and not even anyone blowing up, but from being trampled.
From people leaving the mall.
He's responsible for that too. Carmelita asks, is the death penalty in New Mexico?
I have to look it up. Let me see.
Okay. Let's get some. I wanted to get to some.
No, it's not.
Okay. Carmelita said, I think the point of the death penalty is not necessarily to deter others, but it's saying you no longer have the right to live and you do not have the ability to be reformed. Yeah.
Deserve. Yep.
Well, and that leads to my next question. And like, are our communities safer with the death penalty? You know what I'm saying? If you don't have the ability to be reformed and we eliminated you from the planet and you can no longer be a threat to someone because you're dead, does that make our community safer because it stops you from going out and recommitting? I think some people will use that logic, you know what I'm saying, for the reason why we have the death penalties, to stop someone from, recommitting, reoffending the same way they did the first time. You know what I mean? Is that not what there is? That not some rationale for having the death penalty? Is that you can't reoffend? I would think so. I mean, that's why they put people in prison for life. So you take a life either technically or you take a life behind bars and you can never go back out into the, community and reoffend. I mean, wouldn't that make the community safer? I don't know. What do y'all think?
Well, well, let's see how it happens right now. Like, there's people who do take people out because they're out of revenge. Does that really stop the violence? When people want to play vigilante or they want to get back at somebody and they take a life just on the street without the law enforcement involved. So when they take matters into their own hands, we have to look at it. Does that improve our community or does it make it more dangerous?
Yeah, I mean, because you can't foretell the future, right?
And there's that.
I wouldn't trust someone, like a person who has a life of committing violent crimes, and there are some people who can't be reformed, and you are running the risk of them recommitting if you let them, and reoffending and killing someone else if you let them back into society. I think that's pretty realistic and pretty fair that that's actually happened before. I'm sure people have killed more than once.
I would weigh in that I don't think it's a deterrent, only because, and I was sending a message to a relative to make sure it was okay to tell this story, but I have a cousin that at one point she was dating a guy. She's much older than me. She was dating someone in, I guess, the late 70s, early 80s. And he ended up being one of the killers it was in Los Angeles, called the Bob Big Boy Massacre. And there were people that went to a Stevie Wonder concert. And then afterwards, he needed money, he and his friends. He went to this Bob's Big Boy. Everyone that was there, they had guns, told them all to line up in the freezer, and they took their money. And he had the conversation with the other guys that were with them. I need to kill them because they're going to testify against us. So went and shot and tried to kill everyone. I think one or two people actually lived. So because in his brain, if I'm caught, I'll be killed. So I have to kill everyone. Otherwise, he was arguing that he would have just left, just stolen their money and left. Fortunately, she did end up breaking up with him, but just that it's not necessarily always the deterrent that people think it is. Maybe, and I'm not saying that's in all cases, maybe, and he was placed on death row, but I'm not sure if he actually was executed, because I've tried to forget about him, but because I was a kid when it happened. But in California, he did receive the death penalty because of what he did, only because there were, well, I wouldn't say only because there were people that lived that could testify against him, and he had lighter colored eyes. So they recognized, and they said they would never forget his face and never forget hearing him say that he needed to kill everyone because otherwise they'd be caught. So I'm not sure if it's really a deterrent, or the deterrent that people that are that crazed enough that they're going to kill someone that's premeditated. Are they really thinking that, oh, I won't do this because that's going to stop them because, oh, I might be executed? No, conversely, they're thinking, I need to wipe everyone out to make sure that I'm not executed.
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah, definitely in that situation. I think I was thinking more of like a serial killer, Yeah.
Well, around that time where Tory Davis was executed, here in Texas, they executed the man who drugged James Byrd in Jasper, Texas. I'm pretty sure a lot of people may remember this incident because it's back in the late 90s. Drugged him behind his pickup truck, and he got decapitated during that dragging. So they did execute him that same month. I think 2 weeks prior or after.
Yeah, that's
that
terrible.
one. Yeah, they did execute him in Texas. I think he was the first one in a couple of decades, I believe, was him.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of gets at what I was saying earlier. There's fact patterns that I think if you ask people after you tell them what happened, that the average person would say, I don't believe that individual should be living anymore. If you just tell them what happened. And whether that analysis is fair or not is a different question. But does it go to whether or not the thing that somebody does can show you that they can't be reformed? That's a legitimate question. Is a person that is willing to strap someone onto the back of their car and drive 50, 60 miles per hour or whatever it was, is that a person that we're confident that we can reform? Is that a person that at any point in the rest of their life, we want to see even potentially walking amongst any of us ever again? I think that's a legitimate question. And then you'd say, well, why not just pay for them to be in the state, custody for the rest of the time? And then you're going to meet somebody who's going to tell you, I don't believe that I should have to pay for them to be alive. That's people will say that. They mean that. And they mean it when they say it. And if we remove the race aspect, but you have to do that, of course, in order for that to be an honest conversation, I don't know how to answer that. Do you personally think that you should be responsible for maintaining somebody's life, right, under those circumstances? I don't know. I'm willing to say I don't know, because I know a part of me is thinking, why would I do that?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's irrational.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know if I found out that someone had dragged any of y'all like that, my first thought would be, why? I do not want to support them in any way. I do not want to contribute to their living. I don't want to contribute to their existence. I don't mind if they don't exist.
Yeah.
In fact, I might be happy if they don't exist, for the simple fact that they did this thing to somebody I care about, and I don't have to pay for them to persist. That's reality. And I just want people to be honest about it on that level.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would definitely want it too, but I wouldn't want to see it, and I wouldn't want to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Right, of course.
Oh, yeah, somebody else is doing this for you in this hypo.
Yeah.
Yes, his name was, what was it? I
Well,
had to look it up.
let me ask you something. So, would you pay for someone else to do it? Would you contribute to have some of your money be allocated, whether it's through taxes, estate tax, to pay someone else to do what you're not willing to do?
I think it depends when you ask, right? I think if you ask somebody directly after they hear that story, or if you ask them directly after they receive that knowledge, I think that money is going to fly out of your hand, but you're still going to be price sensitive. You wouldn't go to the extremes for it, right? But if somebody said for $20, I'll do this for you, oh my God, people would hand over that $20 because you spend $20 on less significant things all the time. But if you said, or you can keep them, because here's the other part of the hypo. It's not enough for you to ask whether I would pay to do it. You have to give the other side of the hypo, which is that if you don't pay me the 20 to do it, you have to pay the 20,000 to keep them alive for the rest of time. Oh yeah, that's a layup.
Yes, it's definitely, at least it's definitely cheaper to kill somebody in the way it's all set up. Anthony Ward says it's effective in getting rid of people that do horrible things and some people that haven't. Is it an effective deterrent? Doubtful, partially because the process takes too long and partially because people who most often get it don't care if they live or die. There are ways to make it more effective, and there are ways to run a penal correctional system without it. At its base, that can be effective as a deterrent if criminals do know if they will get it or not. I also don't necessarily. I don't know what that means. But yeah, I mean, he makes some good points. What do you think are some alternatives? Alternative punishments for murder or rape, or something that could land you. I mean, those are the two big ones, right? Murder and rape. Like, what are some alternatives then? If the death penalty is not the math. You might be muted, Trisha.
I think, like, in terms of our community, what Carmelita is addressing, that the majority of our cases have to do with either mental health issues or economic issues, primarily economic. So usually in the commission of a robbery, that's those sort of things. So addressing that issue, that could be not an alternative. It sounds like more preemptive intervention versus after the fact, but also examining the fact that if, with killing people in the commission of a robbery or theft, thinking about what sort of interventions that I'm trying to think of an intervention that could be placed for them versus taking their life. And again, for me, it's difficult because only the fact that there's so much inequity, something as extreme as taking another person's life, I think we need to address those things before we can even have the conversation about other alternatives or even using the death penalty. I mean, it's all good to say that, well, it takes people out that commit crimes, but like if you look at that deathpenalty.org right now, there were 18 people that were executed that it's questionable if they did it. And that was in 2020, all of last year. So yes, there were people that were executed that did commit the crimes, but there are 18, and that we can sleep at night perfectly fine that even one person was killed that didn't really do it. I think that's a problem.
Yeah. Like I said, I just think that, we have a criminal and justice system, that's doesn't have equity, and evolved to, like I said in the beginning of the broadcast, to really carry out the finality of that.
Yes, I'm even thinking right now, when I looked at that website earlier. So right now there's one case of the oldest person on death row who's been on death row. He's a white man who's been on death row for 31 years. And he's supposed to be executed on April 21st, but he's filed an appeal that says that it's cruel and unusual punishment because he's like an old man now and he wouldn't hurt a fly. And but he killed one police officer and he's been on death row for 31 years. So he's filed his appeal versus there's a Native American man who's set to be executed on May 11th, who is blind, disabled. They even admitted through the case that he is so mentally disabled that he doesn't know what he's doing. He didn't know what he was doing even then. He, I think they said he murdered one woman, and he's set to be executed. And then I look and it's like, okay, so he's a fairly young man who's blind and disabled, and he's on the, he's going to be executed with no appeals now on May 11th versus this white man who's been on death row for 31 years, who's filing an appeal so that he won't be executed on the 21st because he's saying, well, I'm old now and I wouldn't hurt anyone. I mean, this other guy is blind and disabled and also wouldn't hurt anyone, but he's also Native American. So they really need to address the inequity and, you know, how it's meted out, or justice is meted out.
I guess the lawyer guy is Bobby. Supporters. You know, I'm looking in the comments about like, you know, things like who should die and who shouldn't. You know, we're talking about serial killers. I mentioned that, like, you know, for me, I feel like, you know, taking them off the street, however we do it, through life or through death is cool with me. And Carmelita said, we're talking about the Ted Bundys, the Richard Ramirez, the John Wayne Gacy's, Charles Manson's, serial killers versus the pathology versus Black people in the community who make mistakes, kill someone during a robbery or lack of resources. I struggle with that. Not to kill someone during a robbery or lack of resources, but there are serial killers in the Black community who prey on other Black people. I would argue that there are serial killers that operate just like a hitman in the mafia. Like their job is to go around and retaliate and kill people who have done things to their street family. I would consider those people serial killers. Maybe it has a different genesis, but they enjoy killing people. There's some kind of pleasure that comes out of it when you talk to some of these people who have, yes, they, like I said, the genesis is different, you know what I'm saying? But they have been conditioned to like, value, and appreciate and find pleasure in committing acts of violence on other people.
Sadist.
And I feel like that's just a different form of a serial killer. When you listen to a lot of like, and I hate to use this example because it feels like really cliche. But I just gotta keep it, I just gotta keep it a kilo. Like when you hear the stories and you listen to like drill music, and then you hear like the actual interviews from people who come from that neighborhood, and they tell you, man, Larry Hoover can get out tomorrow. Kanye can get Larry Hoover out. It ain't gonna stop niggas from killing niggas. You know? And like he's serious, we ain't gonna listen to no old head. Like these are people who actually enjoy killing people. And I wonder if the pathology has gotten so bad, if they can actually be reformed.
Well, okay, so this is why, and this is the response I had to Carmelita. I just don't know that you can ever go into an analysis of a person and then at the end of it say we can rationalize killing them, because if you go into the analysis of the person, you will find a good excuse. And that's because there are so few people that have relatively trauma-free lives that actually end up doing these things. It's an extreme statistical anomaly that somebody would live a relatively normal life and then do something that's terrible. That's why I always come back to the facts are the only way you can generate a feasible argument. You have to focus on what they do. And that's why I think your argument is if there's somebody in the neighborhood who can casually kill 6 other people who look like them, then if you live in that neighborhood, it's going to be completely rational for you to say, I wouldn't mind that person not existing anymore. That's why I sometimes laugh at people in Seattle who have discussions about crime, and they are very much progressive, and they talk about how only a coon or some Black person who's anti-Black could disagree with me. And I'm like, but you have not lived in Detroit or Chicago, where people there who are Black are scared of other Black people in their neighborhood. They will turn around and be tough on crime real quick.
Oh yeah.
Because they live
Real.
but you're in Seattle and your ivory palace talking about theoretical stuff. And it's a joke. It's a joke. That analysis is fake to me a lot of times.
I love Bobby Ivory Tower.
we know that there are certain things that Black people are conservative about, okay, when it comes to politics and what we vote. One is, we like to vote with our religion a lot. We have in the past. Maybe that's changing. But I know the Black Caucus was really, really, really conservative when it came to being tough on crime. They were all for it. Like, harsher penalties for, crimes in the community and things of that nature, because they were speaking on behalf of their constituents to say, man, you need to do something to stop all this crime, to deter it. And the way that the European value system does that is just hand out harsher punishment instead of changing conditions and circumstances that lead to those violent acts. So I totally agree with that. And I think another mitigating factor for me, the reason why I feel that way, is I lived through the 90s in Seattle, where you had to do a color check before you left the house. I was shot out for no reason at all, other than me and the fact that I was in the wrong place at the wrong time for me. And it was intentional. He pulled out a sawed-off shotgun and shot at me because I was in the CD wearing a Boston Red Sox hat. But prior to that, there was about eight young Black men that were about to jump me before that. Just because I was there. They like violence. What the heck did I do? I'm like, oh man, I don't gang bang. Man, I was like 18, 19 years old with my homeboy. I don't bang, man. Oh, we don't care about that. One starts reaching for something. This dude comes out of nowhere. Who got? Pulls out a gun, and as soon as he heard that, I just turned around and started running and pulled my jacket over my head. If it hadn't been a sawed-off shotgun and I hadn't created the distance, I might not be here right now. But what is that about? You wanted to kill someone? You wanted to violently inflict pain on someone for why? Because I was in the wrong neighborhood with the wrong hat on. That's
the doctor may have an answer.
That's a joy. That's getting pleasure from violence. And that's on the same trajectory and shares an intersection with any other serial killer or serial abuser. Now, I would say, could they be reformed? I don't know. I would like to say yes, because of course I have some biases. I work with that community. They look like me. I know plenty of people who probably have bodies on them who don't have a desire or a pleasure to hurt anybody anymore. That's real. I do. We just don't talk about it. And we're not even talking about the people who went to the military and did it. So, and the people that come back from the military, I could make that. You can make the argument. That's why I try to be objective. They come back from the military. A lot of them ain't trying to walk around and kill people who have actually killed people. But,
I want to read you some of the article. I have posted in the comments about the man that is scheduled to be executed in South Carolina. And I just have to look at the article, and I just found something very interesting. And it said the South Carolina Department of Corrections last month completed a $50,000 project to equip a new death chamber for firing squad execution and created a new execution protocol. Under the guidelines, a hooded prisoner will be strapped into a metal chair and given an opportunity to give a final statement before a target is placed over their heart. 3 volunteer shooters, all prison workers, will fire at the heart from a rectangular opening 15 feet away.
That's tough.
That's what it says here. And they have
such a depressing topic.
It is kind of depressing. I'm like, damn.
It's depressing.
It's very morbid.
I just want to take a nap. I mean, man. See, I just and what do you think about what you just now read, Precious? What do you think?
It is because I was just asking how can I was just saying in the beginning of the show, how can someone who you don't know, how you can take a life away of someone you don't know, or they didn't do anything to you personally for you to feel any sort of rage to kill them. But now I'm seeing that they're using prison workers. It just kind of just like, so basically you using other people, did those prisoners commit a murder themselves? So that's why they think it's easier for them to do it and process it compared to one of us doing it who haven't murdered anybody. That's what I'm looking. I said maybe that's what maybe they doing to save money, but they say, you know what? Why not get somebody who's already a murderer anyway to kill them?
Okay.
I know it sounds weird, but I'm just saying. Say all prison workers. I'm like, well, prison workers. I'm not. Are they talking about inmates? Are they?
No, I don't think they're. No, I don't think they're talking about inmates. No.
Or yeah, someone who's already.
Well, we could look into it. I don't want to make a.
I don't want to make an assumption either. I was like, wow, you're getting somebody who's already.
They had they would actually have an actual department that's dedicated to that.
Precious is putting a lot of links in. I got to hear from her.
What are you talking about? A lot of links
in our private. So I feel like she's loading up. She got something to say.
Oh, and I thought I was also talking about what happened after the crime.
Great choice of words, Bobby. Thanks.
Well, thank you. Sorry,
I didn't say she's doing the vial or anything.
What you think, Doc? You might be muted.
Trisha, can you hear us?
Yeah, go ahead. Trisha.
Oh, I can.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was on a data deep dive.
Okay.
I think when we're talking or discussing things like murder, we tend to, I don't want to say Americans, but I will say Americans. Americans tend to go to the boogeyman thing of the stranger that's going to shoot them or rob them, but that's not what's likely to happen. Most likely, if you're going to be murdered, most of the time it's someone you know. With males, it's usually another male that they said, even of your same demographic. The only exception is women. We're more likely to be killed by men versus men are likely to kill other men that know. So, we hear these stories of like robberies and of course, the other thing is, with death penalty for sexual assault of children, it's most likely to be a child, and none of us are children. We don't really focus on the fact that, protecting children from this, and because this is something that they definitely aren't prepared to have happen to them. And one of the repercussions in several states is, murder, the death penalty. So it would be good to focus on the things that really are more likely to happen versus the things that aren't likely. Like they said 30% of murders are committed in the commission of a robbery or another felony. So as important as it is to think, you could be robbed and someone can kill you, there's a 70% chance more likely something else is going to happen, that it's somebody that you know.
Yeah. Unfortunately for me, mine wasn't a boogeyman. No, it was real. I could have died that night.
Everyone said that it's European. They don't do this to each other in Europe. That's what I always think is, I don't know, something happened differently in the US because Well, I can only speak of the European country that I lived in, but they, like I said, they don't believe in capital punishment. They haven't since 1870. They thought it was cruel. They come up with other things, or other means to punish people from. But so I'm not necessarily sure we can say that maybe it was European, but they exported that here, but we kept it. If we look at the countries that practice capital punishment, they're probably the countries that we wouldn't necessarily like to think that we have similarities with, or that we would want to be seen as having similarities with. But I mean, unfortunately, they are. And when they use their death penalty, we'll say that, oh, they're barbaric. That's ridiculous that they're still stoning people and things. And like, we're using firing squads. Come on. Who are we to point at anyone to say that what they're doing is more barbaric?
In the United States. This country is very hypocritical. Very hypocritical. And the man who's to be executed, he's supposed to be on death row for killing a convenience store clerk. So basically a robbery. But they didn't push it to his crime did not rise to the level of a death penalty offense, because he did not bring a gun into the store and did not intend to kill anyone until the store clerk pulled a gun out on him. And they wrestled for the gun, and the man grabbed the gun, and the store clerk grabbed another gun, and they shot at each other. He did get hit. The store clerk did get hit as well, but the store clerk unfortunately passed away.
That's tough. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of arguments that can come out of this. Because I think mine was, mine was kind of like, it was contained into an area or an era of time in the 90s where there was a lot of gang activity in Seattle. And I don't think there's anything that is comparable now for me to fear for my safety. But that was a real thing when you're going to house parties and stuff like that. It was definitely real. Like you could die. You could die at a house party. It's real. I mean, people shooting a lot. So someone could make the argument, well, why aren't they doing that anymore? Well, they swept the streets. Sorry. Someone would make the argument, well, it's 3 strikes, you're out. I mean, it was weed and seed. It was, you know what I'm saying? And that's how the CD cleaned themselves up, which led in, gentrification. And that's the reason why we need tougher, penalties, on people, because look what it did. Like, you were scared, Logic, in the 90s. And if we didn't lock up all those people and we didn't scrub that community and bring in gentrification and, change, that area, then you'd probably be still scared to go to the CD. Someone could make that argument. I don't know. I think you're just moving it to a different location. I just think go somewhere else. I think that type of crime just goes another place.
It's the same shootings that you experienced in the Central District are in Kent. That's
in Tacoma for sure.
Yeah, like that hasn't changed.
That community that I serve, that would be my counter arguments. Like, it just moved further south. That would be my argument, because Tacoma, trust it or not, is top 10 most violent places on the West Coast, statistically. Yeah. So it just moved south. You know what I mean? And I'm at the heart of that because I'm losing students, because of that same type of violence. You know what I'm saying? That almost took me. So it'd be interesting as we go into, what is the plan of action? What do y'all think as we move forward? I mean, for the death penalty, it's kind of, is our proximity from it too far away, since we're not lawmakers or anything, to really have a legitimate, plan of action when it comes to the death penalty? Like, or what is the plan of action to create alternatives to, to that unfortunate resolution? I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear what y'all think a plan of action is when we talk about our thoughts on the death penalty. Bobby, you muted.
I'll strip it all the way down to childhood per usual, because that's the only point where we can make a difference moving forward in time. I just feel like it's a pathology, a belief system, an idea. So I know for my 11-year-old, we had a discussion not long after she moved in about fighting in school. And I asked her, when's the last time you read an article about a rich person getting in a fight? Now, obviously, you have this Will Smith stuff, which I could care less about, but let's just pretend that didn't happen.
Mayweather's very rich.
But just generally speaking, I was like, generally speaking, people who have stuff to lose do not engage in things that involve high levels of risk. And I said, even if you don't feel that you have anything to lose, even if you feel like right now you have no possessions, you still have opportunities moving forward in time that fighting right now will rob you of. You can get in fights in school right now in middle school that will disqualify you from high schools you want to go to. And what we know about this is that if you don't go to the right high schools, your propensity to go to college, et cetera, all the way down the road is affected. I said, so your potential, the rest of your life, can be impacted by the decisions you make right now in middle school, getting in fights. So your conflict resolution decisions as a 12-year-old can impact what you get to do later. And whether you think that's dramatic or not is beyond the point. The pathology and the belief that can happen, that the things that you teach your children early on about conflict resolution can actually impact them for the rest of their life, is something we just have to be better at as a community. Because even beyond the socioeconomic issues, we have to respond to these things that we're not getting any changes in inputs for. So like you always talk about it, if we have the same systems producing the same outcomes, well, if the systems are not going to change, then we actually have to try to respond to that in a different way, because you can't rely on any inputs from externally to save you. We just know that. So if that's the case, then we're going to have to focus on conflict resolution skills. And until we do that, I honestly think we're going to be lost.
Yeah. Yeah, that was good. I was actually going to say the same thing. It's like we gotta put a higher premium and a higher value on, not resolving things violently. You know what I'm saying? It has to be a higher value system for things that respect life more than they respect death, or respect healing more than hurting. And I know it sounds really cliche and corny and whatnot, but a lot of times our first go-to is to be violent. You know what I'm saying? A popular terms, man, I'm going to kill this dude. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe just changing, using that term that term instead of saying, man, I'm going to kill this dude, you know what I'm saying? Or whatever. I really don't mean it, but there's energy behind that and energy behind those actions. And I think that a lot of times to combine what, Bobby says, like when people don't have anything to lose, and for them, violence often gives them the instant gratification that they feel that they need, then they can't see so far out that there can be a conclusion or a resolution that doesn't include that. Like when you're violent, you almost, I'm using this word precisely too, you retard the whole thing. Like it gets retarded. It's like you can't even move forward because it regressed it. Like now you've killed so many opportunities by including violence in it. And I think that we just got to be more, patient and delay gratification in resolving conflict, and not always be set on violence is the first, the last, when it comes to responding to violence. I mean, to any kind of like conflict that we have. We have to start doing that, What you think, Trisha and Precious?
First off, I think violence, I was trying to remember who said the quote, but they may have said it about riots, but violence is the language of the oppressed when they don't have access to the currency. So with violence being, and murder is also an extension of that language of the oppressed. They don't have money in a capitalist system that makes you valuable. So what makes you valued and feared by others is violence. And we need to do something about that to ensure that we have either access to other resources to receive respect. And I think people use fear instead of respect. So they'll think that, well, at least that means they're respecting me because they're afraid of me, what I can do to them. But that's not the language that everyone should have to resort to speaking because they don't have access to money. I also think that, particularly for Black women, it's important for us to realize a Black woman is killed every 5 hours. So on one hand, there needs to be accountability for the killing. So something needs to be done. But on the other hand, we have to remember that violence, oppression, violence as a language. And my step is, I know people always joke about they don't want to do jury duty and how to get out of it. More of us need to not find reasons to get out of jury duty, because
Absolutely.
if you want to see that, decisions are made equitably in terms of who receives death penalty, that the first step is to participate in jury duty. If you do get the call, I've had the call and I've served on juries, and I feel like this whole thing about joking about, I want to get off of it, that's like a ploy just for us to make sure we're not on it. So you need to try and participate and be part of the process, because that's the only way that we're going to start changing things. I mean, we need to participate.
Yeah, I like the jury duty thing. Yeah, I usually get disqualified anyways because I just be honest. But and see my name too, and they be like,
they can't get rid of all of us. So put it that way. There's so many of us are there.
No, I'm saying I'm telling the time that I was on jury duty, I was just honest, and I got disqualified.
All right, that leaves me. I don't, it's kind of, this is one of them situations. It's like I'm dead on the fence, and I don't know exactly what side I'm going to fall on, because there's so many variables when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I will say this: there's not enough of us behind the desk for those type of laws to change, or to even do in-depth investigation when it comes to death penalty. I mean, I see it slightly changing, but again, I don't know how long it's going to be till we truly get to that point. But in the meantime, we definitely have to really think twice about some of the actions that we take, especially when it comes to violence. Like, this is kind of where I say you kind of have to act. I mean, granted, sometimes shit just happens and you just can't have no control over it. But what I'm trying to say is try to be as proactive as you can possibly. Like, and it also starts when you're, and like Bobby said, it does start when you're young. It does start when you're kind of young to understand the actions and consequences, especially us as Black people. We really don't get much grace when it comes to crimes, especially if they're violent. We don't get those type of grace. And for the jury part, I absolutely agree with that. And it's so funny because my middle brother was called the jury. I don't know if he ever went or not. I said, I really wish you did went to that jury. I haven't been called to the jury stand. I'm waiting for the day that happens. I'm waiting for it to come through the mail so I can pop up. But other than that, this is one of playing the act. I don't think I have much of one. I'm really on the fence on.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting when to close out, just to think about, if you, like Trisha talked a lot about, going living in Amsterdam, and I've been to Ghana twice, and we talk about like the different dynamics that play a role in why people are violent, and those are some of the poorest people that I've ever been around, like resource wise, in Ghana, but they were the most wealthy people when it came into being humane, and violence was not a problem. It's probably one of the safest places in the world, actually. You know what I'm saying? Someone might tap you on the shoulder, you look the other way around, you know what I'm saying? Your bag will be gone. But, you know what I mean? Someone might pull a blade on you or something. But like, violence is not something that goes on in a lot of, countries with poor, poor resources and whatnot. So it makes you think of what, you know what I'm saying, makes people violent and not violent. And it comes down to your value system and whatnot. So it's just something to, you know, something to think about. But this was an interesting, you know, episode. I want y'all to tune in to I think Trisha and Precious are going on after this. And then also tomorrow, I know it's a great opportunity to have a conversation with an alopecian. So I'm gonna have Jamie Elmore on C Talk tomorrow. We're gonna be talking about this whole you know, this whole thing with alopecia, bringing awareness to that, because there's a lot of miseducation out there about alopecia. You know what I'm saying? People are saying some really, really insensitive and uneducated stuff about the whole situation and whatnot. So I think it's a good opportunity for Jamie to, you know, educate people on the different forms of alopecia and things of that nature. So anyways, once again, I love y'all. It's C Talk. We'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Thank you.
Peace.